Welcome back to the Bible in 90 Days. We're on day 49. We're really just getting into the book of Isaiah. Isaiah is 66 chapters long. It's the major book of the major prophets. While Jeremiah is no less a prophet, or Ezekiel certainly not less of a prophet than Isaiah. Isaiah's lifetime was like a couple hundred years before them, and his prophecy is mind bending. Okay, I made a, I made a. If you looked at the details on yesterday's video, the comment that I made was that Isaiah was preaching the gospel before it was cool. And you know what? That is the truth about Isaiah. And where that thought came from is I watched those two Bible Project videos. I don't know if y'all saw those, but I posted those in the group yesterday, or the day before, however, whatever day it was, or however it goes. But when I was watching those, it's fascinating to me. And what really fascinates me is how the Jews, and I don't mean that derogatory, I just mean it as the ethnic group of people, the Jews, can have a book of Isaiah and not believe in Christ, because Isaiah's prophecy was just so incredible and so pointed to be Jesus, and was the definition of the Messiah that they were looking for. And it's like it just goes right over their heads. And we have there's this concept, or maybe even if it's a theology, of blindness, of spiritual blindness. It says that God blinds the eyes of those who adhere. And I was preaching Mark 4 Sunday evening, and one of Jesus's major questions that he asked, or calls to worship, was those who have ears, let them hear. God gave us ears to hear and eyes to see, and while we see a lot of things and we hear a lot of things, we don't always listen, and we don't always observe what we see. I notice with my own attention to detail, I am not very good at observing. Like if I met you yesterday, there is no way I would know, I would not be able to describe you by the clothes you wore. I might describe you by your attitude, or by the way you sounded, or how you looked, or if you looked sad, or if you looked just energized or something like that, but I would never know what color shirt you had on. I'm just not that observant naturally. I have to work harder to be observant. Like, I have to acknowledge, oh, that's a cool green shirt you have on, or oh, those are nice shoes, but I almost never look at that. And if I look at it, I don't identify you by that, because in my mind tomorrow you can put on something totally different, and I still want to be able to recognize you. But in all of that, God has given us ears to hear and eyes to see. And though we see things all the time and we hear things all the time, we don't always observe, and we don't always listen. So I need to work on being more observant of the things that I see. I'm pretty attentive to what I hear. I like to listen in on things, but I often miss the point of things and get stuck on a detail. I'm sure that you do too. And that's something that's important to learn as we read the Bible. A lot of times we'll get stuck on a detail and miss the point. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of that is what we read yesterday, Isaiah chapter 1, was, as I was reading Isaiah, I was reading ahead of what we're reading in another version of the Bible. I like to do that. And in this version, it's called the Septuagint. It's the Old Testament Greek of the Bible, and it's an English translation, but I was reading it just to see the differences. And one thing I wanted to note to you is about Bible translations. I am reading the NIV, the New International Version, okay? You might be reading along with me, and sometimes the words that different translators used don't agree. Sometimes this Bible will say something that a translator picked up on that another translator, say the King James or the ESV or another good translation of the Bible, and they say it differently. And like I said, sometimes we get stuck on that. Like we were having a conversation in a group the other day about how some verses are missing from this that are in the King James. And while we get stuck on that detail and say, where did that detail come from and why was it there? We'd say, well, your Bible must be corrupt because it doesn't have it. Well, in fact, it does, because it's at the bottom of the word almost every time. It's going to be in the notes. You see, in your Bible, you have these little letters that correspond to the notes at the bottom of the page. And if you read that, it'll actually have the verse that has been taken out. They don't tell you exactly why, but you know what? Something that's important. I saw another conversation that was going on in another Facebook group or something like that about somebody was saying, I don't read Introduction or Prolegomena. They don't read those. And in essence, if you don't read that, you don't know what you're reading. If you have a favorite Bible and you haven't read the first 20 or 30 pages, which is the introduction and how the translator's notes and those things, you honestly don't know what you're reading. The King James translators even said there will be a better translation come along in the future, and we hope that things like that would, and if the people that would say King James is the only Bible would read their own introduction to their Bible, they would probably embrace modern Bible translations. If you study the science of it and stuff, and I've gotten onto a tangent. But the point I wanted to make with reading from the Septuagint was, I like to, when you find something that doesn't sound the same from one Bible translation to another, it probably is a difficult phrase or sentence to translate. A lot of time, you can't just go word for word from Greek to English or from even Spanish to English. It's not word for word. Word order changes, grammar changes. English uses words like to, for, by, with. These are parts of speech that don't exist in Greek. They exist as extra letters put on a word or a change of a word, and it's an inflected language, and it's totally different. So when we have things that are different, that's something that you take your pencil and you underline it and you put a question mark by it as you're reading, so you can study that. And if you study it, you'll find out why. If you study that, and even if you don't know Greek, but if you study it with other English translations, because there are 20 or 30 different English translations, you can get a general idea of what's going on with that text, what's going on with that word that's not the same. And that's Bible study. That's when you're really getting into what you want to understand. Now, this book is so heavy. I completely recommend, and that's why I'm giving you this longer introduction here today. I urge you to watch the Bible Project videos on Isaiah, at least in order. Watch the first one, and when we get past 39 in a couple days, watch the other one, because those really help you to understand what's going on. Isaiah is a book that you can get lost for an entire career in studying. It is so heavy and so deep, and his prophecies are so curious that we can just get totally lost in them. If trying to understand something a little better, Isaiah lived while King Hezekiah and all that, and he's talking about how all these things would happen to Jerusalem and Judah in the future, how they were when they were happening to Judah, and that they would happen in Jerusalem. So it's just incredibly, it's mesmerizing. Okay. Well, today, like I said yesterday, the first chapter was ultimately an introduction to Isaiah. And you'll see that as we start reading this morning. The chapter 2 begins like another beginning. This is the beginning of his commission. Yesterday what we read in Isaiah 1 is like an introduction, and kind of the key of all of that is verses 15 and 16. When you spread your hands in prayer, I hide my eyes from you. That hits me in the heart. Sometimes when I pray, I feel like my words come out of my mouth and just go flat onto the floor. They never pierce the ceiling. And if they can't pierce the ceiling, how could I expect them to pierce the clouds and go to the throne room of heaven? Now, when you pray, that's where you expect your prayers to go, is all the way to Jesus. And that's what he's saying in verse 15. When you spread your hands in prayer, I hide my eyes from you. Even when you offer many prayers, I am not listening. This is God saying, I am not listening to your prayers. Your hands are full of blood. And before that, he's saying your sacrifice. I don't delight in your sacrifices. Okay. And verse 16, he gives the remedy. Wash and make yourselves clean. Now, he's not talking about wash your hands because you might get COVID. He's not saying wash your hair because you smell. He's saying wash your heart. Search your heart and find where you are wrong. And wash it, clean it, make it right. Go to your brother that you have wronged, or that has wronged you, and make amends. Say, I'm sorry. Or say, hey, this thing you and I are in, we need to get over it. What's wrong? And they will tell you what you did to them or what the problem is. Then you can fix these problems. Okay? And there's nothing more important than your relationship with God. And if your relationship with a brother or a sister or a mother or a father or something like that is impeding on your relationship with God, it is the most important thing in your life, and you need to get it fixed right now. That's the truth. That's the truth of what he's saying right here. Your hands are full of blood. Jesus said, if you, it is written, if you murder someone, you're stand in condemnation. And I tell you that if you say, you fool, Raka, you fool, to him you have murdered him in your heart. Here he's saying your hands are full of blood. If you have this strife for someone else, you need to fix it. You need to get it right. And that's why your prayers are falling on the ground. You need to get right before you get left. Okay, in verse 16, wash yourselves and make yourselves clean. Take your evil deeds out of my sight. Get forgiveness. If it's between you and God, that's the easiest one to fix. Sometimes it's harder to fix something between me and you. Sometimes it's harder to fix something between me and my wife. Sometimes it's not always easy. It mostly hurts your pride. Well, you know what? You don't need that pride. That pride is hurting you. It's not helping you. It feels good for a time, and then it really hurts. Drop it. Stop doing wrong. That's what he says right here in verse 16. Learn to do right and seek justice. And here's how you do it. Defend the poor. Take up the cause of the fatherless. Plead the case of the widow. I don't know, whoever is spreading lies about the Bible, telling you that God is evil, has never read the Bible. God cares about the ones who cannot help themselves. He cares about them so much, he is telling you to take care of them. to take care of people who cannot take care of themselves, the widows, the fatherless, the ones, the one. There is an entire generation growing up fatherless in the United States right now. We need to take care of them. Even if you're fatherless, you need to find your real father and have him fix you, and then take care of the fatherless. That's God's word. That's what God is telling us to do every day. Every day we sit down and read this Bible, he says something along those lines. I have really gotten over with my introduction. This book is incredible. I urge you to pay attention as we read. Let's jump into God's word in chapter 2. This is what Isaiah, son of Amos, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as the highest of the mountains. It will be exalted above the hills, and all nations will stream to it. Many peoples will come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, and to the temple of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, so that we may walk in his paths. The law will go out from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He will judge between the nations, and he will settle disputes for many peoples. They will beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Now, a nation will not take up the sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. So we won't even need guns. We won't need any of those things. Come, descendants of Jacob, let us walk in the light of the Lord." Verse 6. You, Lord, have abandoned your people, your descendants of Jacob. They are full of superstitions from the east. They practice divination like the Philistines. They embrace pagan customs. Their land is full of silver and gold, and there is no end to their treasures. Their land is full of horses, there is no end to their chariots. Their land is full of idols, and they bow down to the work of their hands, to what their fingers have made. So people will be brought low, and everyone humbled. Do not forgive them. Verse 10. Go into the rocks, hide in the ground from the fearful presence of the Lord and the splendor of his majesty. The eyes of the arrogant will be humbled, and human pride brought low. The Lord alone will be exalted in that day. The Lord Almighty has a day in store for all the proud and lofty, for all that is exalted, and they will be humbled. For all the cedars of Lebanon, tall and lofty, and all the oaks of Bashan, for all of the towering mountains, and all the high hills, for every lofty tower, and every fortified wall, for every trading ship, and every stately vessel. The arrogance of man will be brought low, and human pride humbled. The Lord alone will be exalted in that day. Verse 19, people will flee into caves in the rocks and holes in the ground from the fearful presence of the Lord and the splendor of his majesty. When he rises to shake the earth, in that day the people will throw away the moles and bats, their idols of silver and idols of gold, which they have made to worship. They will flee into caverns in the rocks, and into the overhanging crags, and from the fearful presence of the Lord and the splendor of his majesty, when he rises to shake the earth. Verse 22. Stop trusting in mere humans, who have but a breath in their nostrils. Why hold on to them in esteem? Chapter 3. See now, the Lord Almighty, is about to take from Jerusalem and Judah both supply and support, all supplies of food and all supplies of water, the hero and the warrior, the judge and the prophet, the diviner and the elder. the captain of 50, the man of rank, and the man of rank, the counselor, skilled craftsman, and clever enchanter. I will make mere youths their officials. Children will rule over them. People will oppress each other, man against man, neighbor against neighbor. They will rise up against the old, while nobody against the honored. The nobody against the honored. A man will seize one of his brothers in his father's house and say, "You have a cloak, you be our leader. Take charge of this heap of ruins." But in that day he will cry out, "I have no remedy. I have no food or clothing in my house. Do not make me the leader of the people." Verse 8. Jerusalem staggers. Judah is falling. Their words and deeds are against the Lord, defying his glorious presence. The look on their faces testifies against them. They parade their sin like Sodom. They do not hide it. Woe to them. They have brought disaster upon themselves. Tell the righteous it will be well with them, for they will enjoy the fruit of their deeds. Woe to the wicked. Disaster is upon them. They will be paid back for what their hands have done. Verse 12. Youths oppress my people. Women rule over them. My people, your guides, lead you astray. They turn you from the path. The Lord takes his place in court and rises to judge the people. The Lord enters into judgment against the elders and the leaders of his people. It is you that have ruined my vineyard. The plunder from the poor is in your houses. What do you mean by crushing my people and grinding the faces of the poor? Declares the Lord Almighty. Verse 16. The Lord says, "The women of Zion are haughty, walking along with outstretched necks, flirting with their eyes, strutting along with swaying hips, with ornaments jingling on their ankles. Therefore the Lord will bring sores on the heads of the women of Zion. The Lord will make their scalps bald. In that day the Lord will snatch away their finery, the bangles and headbands and crescent necklaces, the earrings and bracelets and veils, the headdresses and anklets and sashes, the perfume bottles and charms, the signet rings and nose rings, the fine robes, the scalps and cloaks, the purses and mirrors, the fine and the linen garments, and the tiaras and shawls. Instead of fragrance, there will be a stench. Instead of a sash, a rope. Instead of well-dressed hair, baldness. Instead of fine clothing, sackcloth. Instead of beauty, branding. Your men will fall by the sword, your warriors in battle. The gates of Zion will lament and mourn. Destitute, she will sit on the ground. Chapter 4. In that day 7 women will take hold of one man, and say, we will eat our own food and provide our own clothes. Let us only be called by your name. Take away our disgrace. Verse 2. In that day the branch of the Lord will be beautiful and glorious. The fruit of the land will be the pride and glory of the survivors in Israel. Those who are left in Zion, who remain in Jerusalem, will be called holy. All who are recorded among the living in Jerusalem. The Lord will wash away the filth of the women of Zion. He will cleanse the bloodstains from Jerusalem by a spirit of judgment and a spirit of fire. The Lord will create over all. Then the Lord will create over all of Mount Zion and over all those who assemble there a cloud of smoke by day and a glow of flaming fire by night. That's what Ezra was always looking for. That's what Ezra and Zerubbabel and all of those remnant people were looking for, and it never came. Over everything, the glory will be a canopy. It will be a shelter and a shade from the heat of the day, and a refuge and hiding place from the storm and rain. Chapter 5. I will sing for the one I love, a song about his vineyard. My loved one had a vineyard on a fertile hillside. I was thinking about the Song of Solomon when I read that earlier. He dug it up and cleared it of stones, and planted it with one of the choicest vines. He built a watchtower in it, and he cut out a winepress as well, and he looked for a crop of good grapes. But it yielded only bad fruit. Now, you dwellers in Jerusalem and people of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more could have been done for my vineyard? What more than what I have done for it? When I looked for good grapes, why did it yield only bad? Now I will tell you what I am going to do to my vineyard. I will take away its hedge, and it will be destroyed. I will break down its wall, and it will be trampled. I will make it a wasteland, neither pruned nor cultivated, and briars and thorns will grow there. I will command the clouds not to rain on it. The vineyard of the Lord Almighty is the nation of Israel, and the people of Judah, and the vine are the vines he delighted in, and he looks for justice but saw bloodshed, for righteousness but heard cries of distress. Verse 8. Woe to you who add house to house and join field to field, till no space is left, and you live alone in the land. Verse 9. The Lord Almighty has declared in my hearing, surely the great houses will become desolate, the fine mansions left without occupants. A 10-acre vineyard will produce only a bath of wine. A omer of seed will yield only an ephah of grain. Woe to those who rise early in the morning and to run after their drinks, who stay up late at night until they are inflamed with wine. They have harps and lyres at their banquets, pipes and timbrels and wine, but they have no regard for the deeds of the Lord, no respect for the work of his hands. Therefore my people will go into exile for lack of understanding. Those of high rank will die of hunger, and the common people will be parched with thirst. Therefore death expands its jaws, opening wide its mouth. Into it will descend their nobles and masses, and with all their brawlers and revelers. Verse 15. So people will be brought low, and everyone humbled, the eyes of the arrogant humbled. But the Lord Almighty will be exalted by his justice, and the holy God will be proved holy by his righteous acts. Verse 17. The sheep will graze as in their own pasture. Lambs will feed among the ruins of the rich. Woe to those who draw sin along with cords of deceit, and wickedness as with cart ropes. Those who say, "Let God hurry, let him hasten his work, so we may see it, the plan of the Holy One of Israel. Let it approach, let it come to view. Let it come into view so that we may know it." Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and clever in their own sight. Woe to those who are heroes at drinking wine, with champions and champions at mixing drinks, who acquit the guilty for a bribe, but deny justice to the innocent. Therefore, as tongues of fire lick up straw, and as grass sinks down in the flames, so their roots will decay, so their flowers blow away like the dust. For they have rejected the law of the Lord Almighty, and spurned the word of the Holy One of Israel. Therefore the Lord's anger burns against his people. His hand is raised, and he strikes them down. The mountains shake, and the dead bodies are like refuse in the streets. Yet for all this his anger is not turned away. His hand is still upraised. He lifts up a banner for the distant nations. He whistles for those at the ends of the earth. Here they come, swiftly and speedily. Not one of them grows tired or stumbles. Not one slumbers or sleeps. Not a belt is loosened at the waist. Not a sandal strap is broken. Their arrows are sharp. All their bows are strung. Their horses' hooves seem like flint. Their chariot wheels like a whirlwind. Their roar is like that of a lion. Their roar like young lions. They growl. They seize their prey and carry it off with no one to rescue. In that day they will roar over it like a roaring of the sea, and if one looks at the land, there is only darkness and distress. Even the sun will be darkened by clouds. Chapter 6. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord, high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were seraphim, each with 6 wings. With two wings they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying, and they were calling to one another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. At the sound of their voices the doorposts and thresholds shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. Woe to me, I cried, I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. Then one of the seraphim flew to me with a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with the tongs from the altar. With it he touched my mouth and said, See, this has touched your lips. Your guilt has been taken away, and your sin atoned for. Then I heard the voice from the Lord saying, Whom shall I send? And who will go for us? And I said, Here I am, send me. He said, Go and tell this people, be ever hearing, but never understanding. Be seeing, but never perceiving. Make the heart of this people calloused. Make their ears dull and close their eyes. Otherwise they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn and be healed. Then I said, For how long, Lord? And he answered, Until the cities lie ruined, without inhabitant, until the houses are left deserted, and the fields ruined and ravaged, until the Lord has sent everyone far away, and the land is utterly forsaken. And though a tenth remains in the land, it will again be laid waste. But as a terebinth and oak leave stumps when they are cut down, so the holy seed will be a stump in the land. Chapter 7. Then Ahaz, son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, was king of Judah. King Rezin of Aram and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, marched up to take flight against Jerusalem, but they could not overpower it. Now the house of David was told, Aram has allied itself with Ephraim. So the hearts of Ahaz and his people were shaken as the trees of the forest are shaken by the wind. Then the Lord said to Isaiah, Go out, you and your son Shear-Jashub. Meet Ahaz at the end of the aqueduct of the upper pool, on the road to the launderer's field. Say to him, Be careful, keep calm, and don't be afraid. Do not lose heart because of these 2 smoldering stubs of firewood, because of the fierce anger of Rezin and Aram, and the son of Remaliah. Aram, Ephraim, and Remaliah's son have plotted your ruin, saying, Let us invade Judah. Let us tear apart and divide it among ourselves, and make the son of Tabeel king over it. Yet this is what the sovereign Lord says. It will not take place, it will not happen. For the head of Aram is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is only Rezin. Within 65 years, Ephraim will be too shattered to be a people. The head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is only Remaliah's son. If you do not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. Verse 10. Again the Lord spoke to Ahaz, Ask the Lord your God for a sign, whether it in the deepest depths or in the highest heights. But Ahaz said, I will not ask, I will not put the Lord to the test. Then Isaiah said, Hear now, you house of David. Is it not enough to try the patience of humans? Will you try the patience of my God also? Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth a son, and will call him Emmanuel. He will be eating curds and honey, and he knows enough. He will be eating curds and honey when he knows enough to reject wrong and choose right. For before the boy knows enough to reject wrong and choose right, the land of 2 kings you dread will be laid to waste. The Lord will bring on you and your people and the house of your father a time unlike any since Ephraim broke away from Judah. He will bring the king of Assyria. Verse 18. In that day the Lord will whistle for flies from the Nile Delta in Egypt, and for bees from the land of Assyria, and they will come and settle in the steep ravines and across the crevices in the rocks, and all the thorn bushes at the watering holes. And in that day the Lord will use a razor hired from the Euphrates River, the king of Assyria, to shave your head and your private parts, and to cut off your beard also. In that day a person will keep alive a young cow and 2 goats, and because of the abundance of milk they give, there will be curds to eat, and all who remain in the land will eat curds and honey. In that day, every place where there were 1,000 vines worth 1,000 silver shekels, there will be only briars and thorns. Hunters will go there, and with bow and arrow, for the land will be covered with briars and thorns. As for all the hills once cultivated by the hoe, you will no longer go there for fear of the briars and thorns. They will become places where cattle are turned loose, and where sheep run. Chapter 8. The Lord said to me, Take a large scroll and write on it with an ordinary pen, Maher Shalal Hashbaz. So I called on Uriah the priest and Zechariah the son of Berechiah as reliable witnesses for me, and then I made love to the prophetess, and she conceived and gave birth to a son. And the Lord said to me, Name him Maher Shalal Hashbaz, for the boy knows how to say my father or my mother. The wealth of Damascus and plunder of Samaria will be carried off by the king of Assyria. The Lord spoke to me again. Because this people has rejected and gently follows the waters, has rejected the gently flowing waters of Shiloah, and rejoices over Rezin, the son of Remaliah, therefore the Lord is about to bring against them the mighty floodwaters of the Euphrates. The king of Assyria with all his pomp, it will overflow all its channels and run over all its banks, and sweep on into Judah, swirling over it and passing through and reaching up to the neck. Its outspread wings will cover the breadth of your land. Emmanuel! Raise the war cry, you nations, and be shattered. Listen, all you distant lands. Prepare for battle and be shattered. Prepare for battle and be shattered. Devise your strategy, and it will be thwarted. Propose your plan, it will not stand, for God is with us. Verse 11. This is what the Lord says to me with his strong hand upon me, warning me not to follow the way of this people. Do not call conspiracy, everything that this people calls a conspiracy. Do not fear what they fear. Do not dread it. The Lord Almighty is the one you are to regard as holy. He is the one you are to fear. He is the one you are to dread. He will be a holy place. For both Israel and Judah will be a stone that causes people to stumble, and a rock that makes them fall. For the people of Jerusalem he will be a trap and a snare. Many of them will stumble, and they will fall and be broken. They will be snared and captured. Bind up this testimony of warning, and seal up God's instruction among my disciples. I will wait for the Lord, who is hiding his face from the descendants of Jacob. I will put my trust in him. Here I am, and the children of Israel has given me, and the children the Lord has given me. We are signs and symbols in Israel from the Lord Almighty, who dwells on Mount Zion. Verse 19. When someone tells you to consult me, mediums and spiritists who whisper and mutter, should not a people inquire of their God? Why consult the dead on behalf of the living? Consult God's instruction and the testimony of warning. If anyone does not speak according to this word, they have no light of dawn. Distressed and hungry, they will roam through the land. When they are famished, they will become enraged, and looking upward will curse their king and their God. They will then they will look toward the earth and see only distress and darkness and fearful gloom. They will be thrust into utter darkness. Chapter 9. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the past he humbled the land of Zebulun, in the land of Naphtali, but in the future he will honor Galilee of the nations, by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan. Verse 2. The people walking in a darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the deep darkness, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as a people rejoice at the harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne, and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. Verse 8. The Lord has sent a message against Jacob. It will fall on Israel. All the people will know it. Ephraim and the inhabitants of Samaria, who say with pride and arrogance of heart, the bricks have fallen down, but we will rebuild with dressed stone. The fig trees have been felled, but we will replace them with cedars. But the Lord has strengthened Rezin's foes against them, and has spurned their enemies on. Arameans from the Philistines from the east and Philistines from the west have devoured Israel with open mouth. Yet for all this his anger is not turned away. His hand is still upraised, but the people have not returned to him who struck them. Nor have they sought the Lord Almighty. The Lord will cut off from Israel both head and tail, both palm branch and reed in a single day. The elders and dignitaries are the head, the prophets who teach lies are the tail. Those who guide this people mislead them. Those who are guided are led astray. Therefore the Lord will take no pleasure in the young men, nor will he pity the fatherless and widows. For everyone is ungodly and wicked. Every mouth speaks folly. Yet for all this his anger is not turned away. His hand is still upraised. Verse 18. Surely wickedness burns like a fire. It consumes briars and thorns. It sets the forest thickets ablaze, so that it rolls upward in a column of smoke. By the wrath of the Lord Almighty the land will be scorched, and the people will be fuel for the fire. They will not spare one another. On the right they will devour, but still be hungry. On the left they will eat, but not be satisfied. Each will feed on the flesh of their own offspring. Manasseh will feed on Ephraim, and Ephraim on Manasseh. Together they will turn against Judah. Yet for all this his anger is not turned away. His hand is still upraised. Chapter 10. Woe to those who make unjust laws, who issue oppressive decrees, to deprive the poor of their rights, and to withhold justice from the oppressed of my people, making widows their prey and robbing the fatherless. What will you do on the day of reckoning, when disaster comes from afar? To whom will you run for help? Where will you leave your riches? Nothing will remain but cringe among the captives, fall among the slain. Yet for all this the anger is not turned away. His hand is still upraised. Verse 5. Woe to the Assyrian, the rod of my anger, in whose hand is the club of my wrath. I send him against a godless nation. I dispatch him against a people who anger me, to seize loot and snatch plunder, to trample them down like mud in the streets. But this is not what he intends. This is not what he has in mind. His purpose is to destroy, to put an end to many nations. Are not my commanders all kings, he says? Has not Calno fared like Carchemish? Has not Hamath like Arpad, and Samaria like Damascus? As my hand seized the kingdoms of the idols, kingdoms whose images excelled those of Jerusalem and Samaria, shall I not deal with Jerusalem and her images, as I dealt with Samaria and her idols? When the Lord has finished all his work against Mount Zion and Jerusalem, he will say, I will punish the king of Assyria for the willful pride of his heart and the haughty look in his eyes, for he says, by the strength of my hand I have done this, by my wisdom, because I have understanding. I removed the boundaries of nations. I plundered their treasures. Like a mighty one, I subdued their kings. Now, listen, do y'all remember back when we were reading in 2 Kings when when the leader of Assyria was sending people to the gates later during the time, he asked whose gods have saved them, even the gods of Jerusalem, or even the gods of the other tribes he had done. So what he's saying here, it's perfect. Verse 14. As one reaches into a nest, so my hand reached for the wealth of the nations. As people gathered abandoned eggs, so I gathered all the countries. Not one flapped a wing, nor opened its mouth to chirp. Does the axe raise itself above the person who swings it, or the saw boast against the one who uses it? As if a rod were to wield the person who lifts it up, or a club brandish the one who is not wood. Therefore the Lord Almighty, will send a wasting disease upon his sturdy warriors. Under his pomp a fire will be kindled like a blazing flame. The light of Israel will become a fire, and the Holy One a flame. In a single day it will burn and consume his thorns and his briars, the splendor of his forests and fertile fields. It will completely destroy, when a sick person wastes away, as a sick person wastes away. 19. and the remains of the trees of his forest will be so few that a child could write them down. Verse 20. In that day, the remnant of Israel, the survivors of Jacob, will no longer rely on him who struck them down, but will truly rely on the Lord, the Holy One of Israel. A remnant will return, a remnant of Jacob will return to the mighty God. Though your people be like the sand by the sea, Israel, only a remnant will return. Destruction has been declared, overwhelming and righteous. The Lord Almighty, will carry out the destruction decreed upon the whole land. Verse 24. Therefore, this is what the Lord Almighty says. My people who live in Zion, do not be afraid of the Assyrians, who beat you with a rod, and lift a club against you, as Egypt did. Very soon my anger against you will end. My wrath will be directed to their destruction. The Lord Almighty will lash them with a whip, as when he struck down Midian at the rock of Oreb. He will raise his staff over the waters, as he did in Egypt. In that day their burden will be lifted from your shoulders, their yoke from your neck. The yoke will be broken because you have grown so fat. 28. They enter Ayath. They pass through Migron. They store up supplies at Michmash. They go over the pass and say, we will camp overnight at Jeba. Ramah trembles. Gibeah of Saul flees. Cry out, daughter Gelim. Listen, Laisha. Poor Anathoth. Madmena is in flight. The people of Jebim take over. This day they will halt at Nob. They will shake their fist at the mount of daughter Zion, at the hill of Jerusalem. See, the Lord Almighty will lop off the boughs with great power. The lofty trees will be felled. The tall ones will be brought low. He will cut down the forest thickets with an axe. Lebanon will fall before the mighty one. Chapter 11. A shoot will come from the stump of Jesse. From his roots, we're talking about the stump again. He's doing a lot of backstitching, okay? The Spirit of the Lord, from its roots will branch. A branch will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him. The Spirit of wisdom and of understanding. The Spirit of counsel and of might. The Spirit of knowledge and fear of the Lord. And he will delight in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes, or decide by what he hears with his ears, but with the righteous he will judge. With righteousness he will judge the needy. With justice he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. With the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. Righteousness will be his belt, and faithfulness the sash around his waist. The wolf will live with the lamb. The leopard will lie down with the goat. The calf and the lion and the yearling together. And the little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear. Their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. Verse 8. The infant will play near the cobra's den, and the young child will put its hand into the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain. For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. Verse 10. In that day the root of Jesse will stand as a banner for the peoples. The nations will rally to him, and his resting place will be glorious. In that day the Lord will reach out his hand a second time to reclaim the surviving remnant of his people from Assyria, from Lower Egypt, from Upper Egypt, from Cush, from Elam, from Babylonia, from Hamath, and from the islands of the Mediterranean. Verse 12, he will raise a banner for the nations and gather the exiles of Israel. He will assemble the scattered people of Judah from the four quarters of the earth. Ephraim's jealousy will vanish, and Judah's enemies will be destroyed. Ephraim will not be jealous of Judah, nor Judah hostile towards Ephraim. They will swoop down on the peoples of Philistia to the west. Together they will plunder the people of the east. They will subdue Edom and Moab, and the Ammonites will be subject to them. The Lord will dry up the gulf of the Egyptian sea with a scorching wind. He will sweep his land. He will sweep his hand over the Euphrates River. He will break it up into 7 springs, so that anyone can cross over on sandals. There will be a highway for the remnant of his people that left from Assyria, as there was for Israel when they came out of Egypt, up from Egypt. Chapter 12. You see how everything's gone from total destruction to beauty? I mean, we're preaching the gospel, man. This is so good. Chapter 12. In that day you will say, I will praise you, Lord, although you were angry with me. Your anger has turned away, and you have comforted me. Surely God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. The Lord himself is my strength and my defense. He has become my salvation. With joy you will draw water from the wells of salvation. In that day you will say, give praise to the Lord, proclaim his name, make known among the nations what he has done, and proclaim that his name is exalted. Sing to the Lord, for he has done glorious things. Let this be known to all the world. Shout aloud and sing for joy, people of Zion, for great is the Holy One of Israel among you. Chapter 13. A prophecy against Babylon that Isaiah, son of Amoz, saw. Raise a banner on a bare hilltop. Shout to them, beckon to them, to enter the gates of the nobles. I have commanded those I prepared for battle. I have summoned my warriors to carry out my wrath. Those who rejoice in my triumph, listen. A noise on the mountains is like that of a great multitude. Listen, an uproar among the kingdoms, like nations amassing together. The Lord Almighty is mustering an army for war. They come from faraway lands, from the ends of the heavens, the Lord and the weapons of his wrath, to destroy the whole country. Wail, for the day of the Lord is near. It will come like destruction from the Almighty. Because of this, all hands will go limp. Every heart will melt with fear. Terror will seize them. Pain and anguish will grip them. They will writhe like a woman in labor. They will look aghast at each other, their faces aflame. See, the day of the Lord is coming, a cruel day with wrath and fierce anger, to make the land desolate and destroy the sinners within it. The stars of heaven and their constellations will not show their light. The rising sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. I will punish the world for its evil, the wicked for all their sins. I will put an end to the arrogance of the haughty. I will humble in the pride of the ruthless. I will humble the pride of the ruthless. I will make people scarcer than pure gold, more rare than the gold of Ophir. Therefore I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will shake from its place at the wrath of the Lord Almighty, in the day of his burning anger. 14. Like a hunted gazelle, like sheep without a shepherd, they will all turn to their own people. They will flee to their native land. Whoever is captured will be thrust through, and all who are caught will fall by the sword. Their infants will be dashed to pieces before their eyes. Their houses will be looted, and their wives violated. See, I will stir up against them the Medes, who do not care for silver, and have no delight in gold. Their bows will strike down the young men. They will have no mercy on infants, nor will they look with compassion on children. Babylon, the jewel of kingdoms, the pride and glory of the Babylonians, will be overthrown by God. Like Sodom and Gomorrah, she will never be inhabited, or live through all generations. There no nomads. That's a tongue twister. No nomads will pitch their tents. There no shepherds will rest their flocks. 21. But desert creatures will lie there. Jackals will fill her houses, and the owls will live there. The owls will dwell, and the wild goats will leap about. Hyenas will inhabit their strongholds. Jackals her luxurious places. Her time is at hand, and her days will not be prolonged. Chapter 14. The Lord will have compassion on Jacob. Once again he will choose Israel, and will settle them down in their own land. Foreigners will join them, and will unite with the descendants of Jacob. Nations will take them and bring them to their own place, and Israel will take possession of the nations, and make them male and female servants in the Lord's hand. They will make captives of their captors, and rule over their oppressors. On the day the Lord gives you relief from your suffering and toil from the harsh labor forced on you, you will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon. How the oppressor has come to an end! How his fury has ended! The Lord has broken the rod of the wicked, the scepter of the rulers, which in anger struck down peoples with unceasing blows, and the fury subdued nations. And in fury subdued nations with relentless aggression. All the hands are at rest and at peace. They break into singing. Even the junipers and the cedars of Lebanon gloat over you and say, "Now that you have been laid low, no one comes to cut us down." Verse 9. The realm of the dead below is all astir to meet you at your coming. It rouses the spirits of the departed to greet you, all those who were leaders in the world. It makes them rise from their throne. It makes them rise from their thrones, and all those who are kings over the nations. Verse 10, they will all respond. They will say to you, "You have become weak as we are. You have become like us. All your pomp has been brought down to the grave, along with the noise of your harps. Maggots are spread out beneath you, and worms cover you. How have you fallen from heaven, morning star, the son of dawn? How have you have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations? You said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens, I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly, on the utmost heights of Mount Zephon. I will ascend to the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down from the realm of the dead to the depths of the pit. Those who see you stare at you. They ponder your fate. This is the man who shook the earth and made kingdoms tremble, the man who made the world a wilderness, who overthrew its cities, and who would not let his captives go home. All the kings of the nations lie in state, each in his own tomb. But you are cast out of your tomb and rejected like a rejected branch. You are covered with the slain, and with those pierced by the sword, those who descend to the stones of the pit, like a corpse trampled underfoot. You will not join them in burial, for you have destroyed your land and killed your people. Let the offspring of the wicked never be mentioned again. Prepare a place to slaughter his children for the sins of their ancestors. They are not to rise to inherit the land and cover the earth with their cities. Verse 22. I will rise up against them, declares the Lord Almighty. I will wipe out Babylon's name and survivors, her offspring and descendants, declares the Lord. I will turn her into a place for owls and into a swampland. I will sweep her with the broom of destruction, declares the Lord Almighty. The Lord Almighty has sworn, surely as I have planned, so it will be as I have proposed, so it will happen. I will crush the Assyrian in my land. On my mountains I will trample him down. His yoke will be taken from my people, and his burden removed from their shoulders. This is the plan determined for the whole world. This is the hand stretched out over all nations. For the Lord Almighty has purposed, and who can thwart him? His hand is stretched out, and who can turn it back? Verse 28. This prophecy came in the year King Ahaz died. Do not rejoice, all you Philistines, that the rod that struck you is broken. From the root of that snake will spring up a viper. Its fruit will be a darting, venomous serpent. The poorest of the poor will find pasture. The needy will lie down in safety. But your root I will destroy by famine. I will slay your survivors. Wail, you gate. Howl, you city. Melt away, you Philistines. A cloud of smoke comes from the north. There is not a straggler in his ranks. What answer will be given to the envoys of that nation? The Lord has established Zion, and in her his afflicted people will find refuge. That's it for today. Man, that is good. Y'all see my excitement for Isaiah? It really is a masterpiece, I'm telling you. There is a reason people have been reading this book for 3,000 years. Isaiah. Man, it's incredible. You know, a fun fact, do you know that they found in the Dead Sea Scrolls a perfect scroll of Isaiah that had all 66 chapters in it? I mean, there are pieces of it there that you can't read, but that's mostly on the bottom of the pages. They found the Great Isaiah scroll from that was probably buried 200 years before Christ in the caves, and when they checked that against what we have here, it's not different. These apologetic things, man. Man, I hate when you start researching, when you see a juicy story on the internet, you see a story on the internet that makes you say, oh, well, I hope that's real. That means, what I think is being upheld. So you start studying it and you find holes in it and you kind of ignore them. When I started studying the Bible to see, I kind of studied it hoping to find stuff that was wrong with it, and you find things that you can say are contradictions, and you can find plenty of those, like things, especially things in the Proverbs and Psalms. Well, you can't hold a proverb against something, a certain situation. There are times when you raise your children in the way they should go, and they do veer from that path. That's not a law. It's an encouragement for you to raise your children the right way. Now, you can raise your children the right way, and they can rebel against you. They have against God the whole time. He raised up Israel to go in the right way. Like he was saying in that parable, he planted a vineyard, and he did everything right. And when he went back to check the grapes, it was all thorns. What did I do wrong? God asks. What did I do wrong? Nothing. You were foolish. Man, this stuff is so heavy. Well, guys, I love you. I love Isaiah too. I really love Isaiah. I'd like to say Isaiah loves you too, but he just doesn't seem that lovey-dovey. I think Isaiah loves us, but his love is his love's kind of like my love. It's kind of tough. It's kind of raunchy. It's kind of, but he also lived in the time when a people needed tough love, and I think we do too. We live in a time where we need prophets to stand up and say, look, this is wrong. God says this is wrong. And they need to be forceful in their word, and they need to be true, and they don't need to compromise anything. If you're that kind of person, don't call yourself a prophet. Just be one. God loves you. I love you too. Y'all have a wonderful day. Amen.